Hello, everyone. My name's Greg Wiles, and I guess I'll do a quick introduction here. And just so you know, I'll just talk a little about my background. We'll go over the industry. I mean, the thing about the energy sector, it's really split into two right now for careers. We're looking at the traditional energy sector, which is very different from the renewable energy sector, and we'll cover both sides of the energy sector as I go through the presentation. And I think the questions have normally and the feedback we've gotten is mostly on the renewable side, so I'll probably cover that for the most part. But if I miss anything on the traditional side, for anyone interested in traditional energy, just make sure to ask a question about that, and I can help with that. So let's start clicking through here. So about me, I have an undergrad from Boston College in economics. After Boston College, I went to work for Citigroup in their oil and gas investment banking group. I worked mostly with a bunch of refining companies, major oil companies like Exxon, Shell, and those types, and then a little bit in the biofuel space as well, which is how I got interested in actually renewable energy. I went to Harvard Business School and got my MBA there, spent some time working on various projects there for a green battery company, for a biofuels company. Between 2 years at business school, I actually worked at Morgan Stanley's infrastructure fund with their working on energy assets for them, so pipelines and renewables. And then after I graduated HBS, I went to U.S. Renewables Group, where I currently am as an associate, and we're one of the largest U.S.-focused pure-play renewable energy investors, along with Coastal and Kleiner. It's basically three of us, and we invest in a wide range of technologies, everything from biofuels to geothermal, wind, solar, energy storage, all the above. So that's a little bit about my background, so I guess we'll click through and just really talk about the energy sector. So as I said earlier, it's really split into two areas nowadays. We're looking at the traditional energy sector and the renewable energy sector. Traditional energy generally is what I'm referring to as oil and gas, pipelines and storage, getting that oil and natural gas from the field to the consumer. It also includes electric utilities, right, who burn fossil fuels or renewables, but mostly fossil fuels to produce electricity. And the independent power producers usually have collections of power plants throughout the United States or across the world. That's generally what we refer to when we think about the traditional energy sector. This sector is generally characterized by very large companies, everything from the largest company in the world, ExxonMobil, all the way down. Even the small firms are still large. They're still multi-billion-dollar companies. They're in the oil and gas space, the independents, as they're known, which are companies that still drill for oil and gas but aren't as well known. They don't deliver oil to the consumer. But these are all big companies, large balance sheets, large entities. As far as the industry itself, it's usually pretty highly regulated, especially electricity. Electricity, the utilities can only earn a certain return on capital. So that means generally you may say less exciting, but there's a lot going on there, especially with renewables. But it is a regulated industry, and you're dealing a lot with government entities with regards to electricity. Especially the oil and gas firms, these companies have large global footprints. If you work for a company like Exxon, Shell, BP, you're going to be traveling all over the world. You'll have opportunities to go really anywhere from Malaysia to Nigeria to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking for a really international experience in a career. Oil and gas firms are really the way to go. And generally, this sector is characterized by steady, stable growth. And these are large companies looking to grow very steadily and earn a good return on capital for their investors. So you're not getting the crazy growth, and there's not a lot of opportunities for startups in the traditional energy sector. And that's really the point. If you're looking to start in a small, fast-growing firm, traditional energy is probably not where you want to end up. On the other side, there's renewable energy. Renewables generally includes wind, solar, geothermal, and hydro, all the different ways of generating electricity from renewable sources. There's also biofuels, which are different ways of generating oil or ethanol from biological sources. So people generate biofuels from, as you know, corn, but also sugar, municipal solid waste, landfill gas. There's a whole different variety of ways you can generate fuel from those sources. And then the other side is really energy efficiency. It's the ways in which we can actually use energy more efficiently, and there's a lot of startups that focus on getting people to reduce their energy usage through various ways. And that's another big, fast-growing sector of the space that seems to be gaining the most attention right now, given how really subsidized the other sources are. Most of these companies in the renewable space are smaller, or they're small divisions of firms. General Electric, for example, has a renewable energy division. It's very large, but again, it's not any compared to the size of companies in the renewable or in the traditional energy space. Excuse me. The only, I guess, downside I would say about the renewable energy sector, and I get to experience this every day in my job, is that this was once a very fast-growing sector. In the last 5 years, it's grown tremendously. Unfortunately, what's been happening is the sector's been slowing down of late, given the withdrawal of subsidies, given what's been going on in Washington in the last couple of years. And so a lot of companies are sort of backing off from the growth sector, in the United States at least. It's actually a very fast-growing sector abroad still, especially in areas like China, Europe. Renewables are really growing very rapidly. But in the United States, it's slowed down quite substantially, and so you're not seeing quite the same growth. Now, there are still opportunities in the renewable energy sector, and there's still a lot of startups out there, but things such as like solar manufacturing, wind turbine manufacturing, that really has sort of slowed down in the U.S. and really has gone to places like China and Germany. And so, I'll be focusing on the U.S. a lot in this presentation, but if you want to go and live in China or Germany, there's amazing opportunities in manufacturing for solar, wind, all kinds of interesting areas. But in the U.S., it's more about developing solar, wind assets rather than actually building those products. But again, I should say there are a lot of startups right now in this space. We see them every day at U.S. Renewables Group. There's a lot of companies trying to get off the ground. There's not as much capital out there to fund these renewables as there were 5 years ago, but they're out there, and there's opportunities in that space. So let's talk about, first of all, how to really research the industry and learn about these companies. So when we're talking about traditional energy, the best source for learning about companies and learning about the industry is really the big government-owned or government-sponsored research groups. So the IEA, the International Energy Agency, and the EIA, the Energy Information Administration in the U.S., have a wealth of information. You can learn all about trends in oil, gas, in pipelines, transportation. It's really the best source to actually learn about the industry. Other sources are the websites of these companies. I mean, you know the companies' names. You can research them. Just type in on Google Finance the name of the company, and you can get all their competitors. I mean, these are well-known corporations. So really going on to the websites and learning about the career opportunities is really the best way to get into these companies. A lot of these firms recruit at schools, especially the ones down in Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma. And if they don't recruit at your school, you should see if your school has some sort of way to connect to those schools down in Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, because a lot of firms or a lot of schools have these sharing arrangements. So you can actually check out the job banks for those schools. But generally, the big companies like Exxon, BP, they recruit almost everywhere. So they're not hard to find. For mid-career folks, again, it's a big industry. So you can find people through LinkedIn, I imagine, or just calling up the companies, really. So, I mean, it's really a traditional job search when you're looking at traditional energy. Now, flip side to renewable energy, finding information, first of all, is not as easy. These companies are small, they're growing. Green Tech Media is really the best place to get information. That's where we spend a lot of time learning about the industry, is through Green Tech Media. Go on the website, look around. They sort by industry, and you can really learn all about the recent trends in the various industries through Green Tech Media. Also, the Green Blog on NewYorkTimes.com is another great source. They publish articles daily about interesting things going on in the renewable energy sector, and then that's where you pick up names of companies that are doing interesting things. You can also actually go on the websites of firms like U.S. Renewables Group or Kleiner Perkins or Coastal Ventures and get the names of some fast-growing, interesting technology plays that are being backed by venture capitalists. And we'll get into this on the next slide, but renewable energy firms really recruit. These are small companies. They don't spend a lot of resources going to schools to recruit for people. So you really need to try to do more of a network search. So either find people you know who might know someone who works there, try to see if you have any friends who work in venture capital that might know some of these people, or, I mean, you may just want to just shoot off an email in the career section. I mean, it sounds like sending it off to a black box, but you'd be surprised the number of friends I have in the renewable energy sector who have just sent emails through a website and gotten a call back. So let's talk more about what these firms are actually looking for potential employees. And I can't emphasize it more. It's really engineers. They love engineers. So if you have an engineering background or a strong analytical background, I think it's something to very much focus on and market to them. Even the business side guys, a lot of them have engineering training or worked on the engineering side of things. So it's really important to have that if you really want to stand out. Now, what if you're not an engineer? I'm not an engineer. A lot of people are not engineers. So how do you do this? Well, first of all, you want to make sure you demonstrated interest in the space, especially with renewable energy, whether that's through extracurriculars you did at school, whether that's through what you did in your previous jobs to try to work towards the energy side of things, any involvement you might have in startups, whatever it is, just you need to demonstrate some sort of fact that you actually like the space. There's a lot of people who are trying to get into renewable energy that think it's a fun, interesting sector, but have no real background of anything they've even tried to do to get into the space. So something along those lines would be very, very important to see on a resume. Again, like I said, background in the sciences, economics, that shows quantitative thinking or thought, because in the end, these are very technical businesses, whether it's oil and gas drilling, like getting down to a well, or whether it's learning how a solar cell works. It's actually very important to be able to understand that. And so looking for someone who can not only has business skills, but also can actually learn the details of the business and actually really understand it. And when we look at CEOs at U.S. Renewables Group here, we're looking for a management team that really understands what the technology is, even if they're not engineers by background. So I think it's really important to have those skills and be able to show that you can pick it up quickly, learn the technology, and be able to either sell it if they need someone to do marketing, or help run operations if they need help with the operating side. So very important to have those skills and demonstrate those skills. Oil and gas firms, interestingly, are sort of desperate for young talent. Everyone wants to go into renewables, it seems nowadays. But really, if you're looking for a great job that really has some interesting background to it, I would recommend looking at the oil companies if you're interested in energy in general. A lot of the oil firms actually have renewable energy divisions, but I think they are sort of desperate because there's a lot of old guys that seem to be running these companies nowadays, guys in their 50s and 60s, and they don't really have the same young talent they've been getting recently. So it's actually much easier to get a job at an oil and gas firm nowadays than it is in a renewable energy firm. So what to expect in the recruiting process? First, let's talk geography. The energy business is very concentrated, especially in the United States. If you're looking at traditional energy, chances are you're looking at Texas, Houston in particular, and Oklahoma. So if you're not there, you're not willing to move there, then it may be difficult to get a job in the traditional energy sector. Although they'll probably have you move to places all over the world, you need to start off at their headquarters there in Texas. So I think keep that in mind, that if you want to work in traditional energy, you better be willing to relocate to both either Texas or somewhere else in the world. With renewable energy, we're talking about California. There are some pockets in Boston. There's a couple companies in New York, but really San Francisco, Silicon Valley is where most of the technology companies are located. There's a couple down here in LA, but generally these companies tend to cluster around the VCs that are funding them. So really, if you want to live in California, renewables is a good bet for you. Utilities, if you're interested in electricity, those are kind of scattered throughout the country. They tend to be regional, so they'll be really all over the place. So if you're looking to not be in Texas or California, that's really where you want to be looking at. In terms of how to do this whole process, you need to identify companies you want to work for, and then reach out. It's much easier than just going through job listings and applying things. Find companies you actually want to work for. Learn about the company and what their values are, and whether or not that matches up with what you want to work for, and then go after those companies. I think that's really the best way to go about it in energy, especially renewable energy. Find out about the company, learn about whether you actually might like it there, and then go after them. And be persistent, in all honesty, especially renewable guys. They get tons of inquiries all the time. We get resumes across our desk constantly. And we're looking at people who are actually really interested in it and really want to do it. So you really need to be persistent and really go after companies and know why you want to do it, right? Have a story. Be able to say why you actually want to work for a battery storage firm. If batteries have no interest to you whatsoever, then don't apply to the company. That'll come through in the interview, I guarantee you that. Information interviews, best way to go. I sort of covered this, but really email someone, say you want to learn more about the company, see if it actually fits with what you're doing. A lot of companies right now, given how uncertain renewables are especially, don't have a lot of jobs. There's just not a lot of things out there right now, but they come up, right? So there's not a lot of just, we need some guy to work in operations. We have a specific project to work on, and we need someone to work on that project and someone to have that has background that's good for that project. So it's important to put your name in the mix, realize it's going to be a long process, probably 4 to 6 months, and just make sure you're in there. You're constantly following up with people once a month and just making sure that you're always on their radar screen. So when something comes up and we say, oh, that'd be interesting, we could use someone for that, we can do that. So for example, U.S. Renewables Group, we weren't currently hiring right now. We weren't hiring. We've had a bunch of people inquiring, but we just started up a Latin American focused fund that's going to invest in Latin American renewables. And we had people who were hanging around the hoop, people who were around, and we brought a couple in and hired someone. People who have been inquiring about us for over a year. And so it's those sort of things that tend to happen in renewable energy finance, or whether it's in the companies themselves. So it's just important to be there and cast a wide net and really show your persistence. And that's it. I talk very fast. I apologize if people missed anything. I covered as much as I think the bases. So if we can maybe move on to questions, we can hopefully get some more specific questions answered for people.
Excellent, Greg. That was great. So we had a bunch of questions submitted in advance, and I would highly encourage everyone who's on the line to submit more questions as we go if anything crosses your mind. So first, we had a couple questions around post-MBA roles. So, what tend to be those post-MBA roles that people should be looking for?
So I think some of the interesting roles in the sector are really project management roles and business development roles. The energy business is really project-based. There are plants that need to be built, plants that need to be managed, and in terms of oil and gas, fields that need to be drilled, and oftentimes looking for someone to help manage those. So what you'll often have is you'll either be a project manager if you have more experience before your MBA, or if not, you'll be sort of the second guy down from the project manager, helping manage the operation, whether that means helping with the permitting process, whether it means developing financial models for whether or not this actually makes financial sense, meeting with customers, suppliers, things of that nature. So that's what you can, really expect generally in the energy business. It's hard to generalize across everything, but that's really, I think, the best roles. If you have a finance background, finance management, if you have any sort of operational background or marketing background, I think you'll be more in a project management role. So I think those are really the roles you'd be going for. Excellent.
And you mentioned finance there. Is there much in terms of corporate finance? Is that a kind of classic post-MBA role?
Yeah, I think it's very popular in the traditional energy firms. So I know, Exxon, Chevron, those guys have giant corporate finance departments, and they're always hiring for those, and those are great opportunities if you're trying to really develop your corporate finance chops. But when it comes to renewable energy, again, these firms are relatively small for the most part, so a lot of them don't have a corporate finance function. I know one of our companies that we own called Solar Reserve. It's a very fast-growing, relatively large startup, if you will. They'll probably go public or be sold at some point in the next couple of years, but they don't even have a corporate finance department. They're just developing one right now, and they might hire someone who has many years of experience in that sector. So again, there's not really a lot of meat in those departments, and so you're really looking at being more of the project developer's helper to help do the financial modeling, to help him wherever he needs to be helped. It's more of an all-encompassing role rather than specific corporate finance.
Right. So you see more of the kind of traditional post-MBA roles in traditional energy, which I guess isn't surprising. And then that's what they recruit for. The recruit MBAs for, and that's why they're at the business schools recruiting you guys. But the issue is that if you want to go into renewable energy, then renewable energy firms just don't recruit because they don't have these specific roles for MBAs. But they want MBAs. They want guys who can run financial models, who understand contracts, who understand the basics of how business works. It's just that there's not the predefined roles for those people, which is why you have to find the companies and say you're interested and show me your resume, and then you can find something that works for you. Excellent. Okay, perfect. You mentioned a little bit about kind of the hubs within the U.S. When you think about internationally, whether it be in Canada or in Europe, what are the hubs, let's say, for traditional energy, and what are the hubs for renewable energy?
Yeah, so when it comes to traditional energy, what you're generally looking at are the places that have oil, right? So London used to be large, but the North Sea has depleted a lot of its resources. Nigeria, if anyone's interested in doing Africa, it's pretty large right now. BP is based in London. It's really sort of all over the place. China, Malaysia, Russia, if anyone has a Russian background, I wouldn't recommend going there unless you actually are Russian or have connections there. But I mean, I think all those are definitely areas you can go. Renewable energy, it's a little more nuanced. I mean, really, it's China and Germany that are doing the most in this. I mean, there's places in Europe and companies in Europe, aside from Germany, but really Germany is the center of the renewable energy world right now. I would say completely. I mean, even the U.S. is not really doing as well as they are right now. And if you're Chinese or you want to work in Hong Kong or Beijing, I mean, those are really big areas right now. The manufacturers of basically all the solar panels in the world are there right now. So there's definitely a lot of geographic diversity. But I mean, in terms of the traditional U.S. or England, if you're a U.S. Citizen, there's not much in London or England you can get on board with. Australia is also not very developed in the renewable sector, although they're trying to get up the curve.
Okay, excellent. There's a few people on here who have mentioned being career changers, so either coming, let's say, from a finance background or maybe from a somewhat related industry such as telecom with some smart metering overlap. If you don't have a lot of energy background as you head into your MBA, what would you recommend, how would you approach this sector?
So if you're going into business school and you're in your first year, I mean, do anything you can to really build your background in that. So if your school has an energy club or an energy and environment club, is what we had at HBS that focuses on renewables, doing a focus on renewables, taking a lot of classes on renewables if you're interested in that area or energy. I think that's important to do that. Oftentimes, also a lot of these startup companies, and we actually do this here at USRG with some of our portfolio companies. A lot of these companies are looking for free labor, and if you're an MBA student, you can provide free labor. And so a lot of times they'll have things they want to look at that they just haven't had time to do because they're going so fast, and their evil VC overlords won't give them more money to hire more people. And so oftentimes, like, we will hire these MBA students, well, not hire, but use internships to let them work on interesting projects. I did that personally at business school with a green battery company, and there's a lot of companies out there looking for that. So if there's a company that interests you and you may potentially want a job at, I think it makes a lot of sense to call them up and say, I'm an MBA student, I'm interested in this, I have a background, like you said, in telecom, for example, and I'm interested in smart grid or whatever it is, and I could be valuable to you somehow, let me work for you. And so that's a really good way of really getting into the sector and showing that you have demonstrated an interest in it. As an MBA, I mean, I don't know, if you're a career changer and you're not in business school right now, I mean, I really think the best way is just try to find the ways in which your previous career could add some value to a renewable energy firm. And oftentimes, I mean, again, renewable energy is very diverse. There's a lot of different ways of going about it. I mean, we just invested in a company that recycles asphalt shingles, right? I mean, and so if you have some sort of background in waste, or you work for a waste company, or anything along those lines, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to spin your background. And so I would do more research on the industry and find out what people are doing out there, and your background could really apply to a lot of these companies.
Excellent. We have another question just come in on cultural norms. So, clearly renewables and traditional are very different industries, but are there any cultural norms that people should be aware of when they're looking to recruit in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, sort of spin any lies or any stereotypes or any of that sort here, but I will say that the traditional energy network and its traditional energy space, and it's something they're trying to shed. I know they're trying to shed this, but has a reputation of being very good old boy. Very much, it's a lot of guys from Texas who are, and men, really it's men, who run a lot of these companies. And that's why you see so little diversity in these companies. It's really just, white guys from Texas. And to a lot of people, that's very important. And so if you're prepared to deal with that sort of environment, I think you should just go forward with it. But I do know that, those firms are definitely full of an environment that personally I've known people who felt uncomfortable working in those environments. So I think it's important to really diligence the culture of a firm, especially in traditional energy. And there's a lot of exceptions, right? Like Southern California Edison, the utility here in Southern California, it's got a great culture. I know people who work there, and they had a great time. But it's important to really look into that in the traditional space. In the renewable space, it's pretty easy to characterize. I mean, it's a bunch of people who are really interested in technology. It's very similar to the high-tech space, right? It's people who are interested in new technologies, We're very interested in fast-growing things, fast-growing companies, people willing to take on a lot of responsibility, and they're generally flat organizations, not a lot of bureaucracy. In the traditional energy space, you'll be climbing a ladder. I mean, and these are like large established firms. So it's important to understand that distinction. In that renewable energy will definitely be flat, fast-growing, fast-paced, whereas traditional energy will be certainly a little more slow, bureaucratic, but people thrive in that environment. So it's important to understand what you want and what you're trying to get out of your experience.
Right. Okay. And let's say you, a few years into kind of your career in the energy sector, are there various, or what are the exit opportunities if you decide that you want to leave that people generally go on to?
From the energy sector?
Yeah. Or if you started traditional energy, what's the natural kind of place after you leave that area?
Yeah. So what the energy sector tends to be, and this is forewarned for those who don't have any experience in the energy sector, energy sector is very much about contracts and development. And so it's finding a contract for the thing you're producing and then going out and successfully producing it. And so any job that requires significant experience in making contracts, which tends to be most of business, but really it's a lot in energy. And then project development really is a multitasking skill, right? It's being the ability to do several things at once and be able to manage several different processes at once in order to bring it all together into one completed project. And these projects can be enormously complex and involve several moving parts. And unfortunately, in some of our investments, they take longer than they should because they're so complex. So I think when you're going on, I think you have the skills of being able to say, I know all about contracts, how to deal with various counterparties, and being able to really bring together several different parts into a project. So I think project management is valuable anywhere in the business world. So I think it actually is pretty applicable everywhere else. Although personally, I don't know a lot of people who have actually moved out of the energy sector yet. I guess I'm young in my career. Most people tend to stick with it because I guess it requires a certain person to really find a passion for oil or wind.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. And then two final questions, actually. In terms of, you mentioned moving around a fair amount. What is the need, let's say, for living in remote areas? Is that kind of a reality of the job, or is there more flexibility to stay in urban centers?
I think there is more flexibility. I mean, you can opt out. I think if you work for, let's say, Shell, and they have a new project they're starting up in Gabon, and they need you to go help out with the project management there. I mean, I think you can say no. You can say, I have a family, I don't want to move to a random African country. I mean, you can say that, and that, I think, is respected. For those who want to rise up in the organization and want to become the CEO of Royal Dutch Shell, I think that's going to be difficult because I think those companies especially place a lot of value on experiencing being in different locales and understanding how the market works in various places around the world. So I think you have to balance that. When it comes to renewable energy, these firms are small and they're generally based in one place. You're probably traveling a lot to either go raise money or to meet with suppliers, but it's much less than the traditional energy sector. And so I think that's something you have to just think about, as in any company, really. I mean, any large multinational, you're going to have to rise up. You're probably going to have to live abroad at some point these days. So I think about that. I think what we really want. If it's not something you're going to do for the rest of your life and you want to become the CEO of the giant company, then you're probably okay saying, no, I won't take that assignment. I'll stay in Houston, thank you very much, and work in something else.
Right. Okay, so I have one more question for you, but to everyone on the line, if you have any more questions, chat them in the next little while, and then we'll tie off. So first question is, or I guess last question for me is, if you look at your experience in the energy sector, what would you say you like the most about it? And then, what is one drawback that you have?
I think the most interesting thing is just how fast things change. I mean, even in the traditional energy sector, for those who've been reading up on it, I mean, shale gas, or extracting natural gas from shale, and oil actually from shale, has just exploded in the last few years, and it's completely changed the dynamic of the industry in the United States. And so it's interesting and it's amazing how quickly things can change and how unpredictable things are. It makes it a challenge, of course, to make large investments when you don't know where oil prices are going to be in 6 months. But I think it's very interesting. And of course, in renewables, it goes without saying that technology is changing every day, and things are just so dynamic right now. So it's very interesting, and you realize, I think, when you step back a little bit, how important energy is and how crucial it is to power all of our iPhones and iPads, to actually provide that electricity, or to power cars. And so it's a very fascinating space to be in, because things are always constantly changing. I think the downside would be, and this is something that I've particularly not loved, but it's something you become good at, and that is contracts. I mean, if you need to have patience to be able to sit down and read a 100-page contract, because that's really what the energy business is built on, is long, very complicated contracts that deal with a lot of unforeseen incidents. I mean, for those who followed the Gulf of Mexico spill with BP, I mean, that the entire thing was all about the contracts between BP and Halliburton and Transocean, the provider of the rig, and who was responsible for what. And it's funny, you do all these contracts where you say, oh, well, this is never going to happen, but things like explosions on rigs happen, and you have to make sure that when you're responsible for making that contract, that you don't slip up somehow and cost your company billions of dollars. So it's very important. It's very minutia, and so if you're someone who has no patience for reading through long contracts, then you probably should not come into the space, because it's really central to the whole business.
Right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Greg. That was fantastic. It was a great overview of everything. I think we answered a lot of the questions that people had. For everyone on the line, we have recorded this session, and it will be distributed to your schools for watching at a later date. If you'd like to book a session with Greg specifically for one-on-one coaching, you can do that through Evisors, and that can be for anything from interview prep to some of the more personalized tips on how you can network within this industry. So with that, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really appreciate it.